Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a real paradox, the story of Burundi. It's a nation that was once a proud, independent kingdom right in the heart of Africa. But today, it's facing some of the world's most profound challenges.
So let's just start with a pretty stark fact. Just a few years ago, Burundi was officially ranked the least happy country on the entire planet. And it's still one of the world's poorest countries by nominal GDP per capita. Just let that sink in for a second.
But here's the thing, it wasn't always this way. Not even close. Burundi is a direct continuation of a pre-colonial African kingdom. So you have to ask, right, what on earth happened? To find the answer, we need to go back in time.
To really get what's going on now, we have to rewind the clock, way back. Long before any colonial maps were ever drawn, the Kingdom of Burundi was this thriving, complex society. In fact, the first evidence we have of this state goes all the way back to the 16th century.
So for centuries, we're talking hundreds of years, Burundi was an independent kingdom called Urundi. It was ruled by a monarch, the Mwami. And you can see how it grew from its beginnings in the 1500s into a really consolidated kingdom by the mid-1700s, all before European colonization even began.
Now, the whole society was built around this system called Ubuga Bir. It basically created a hierarchy with herders, who were mostly Tutsi, generally having a higher social status than farmers, who were mostly Hutu.
But, and this is so important to get, these labels, Hutu and Tutsi, they weren't the rigid ethnic boxes we think of today. Not at all. A Hutu farmer who got wealthy, acquired a lot of cattle, could actually become a Tutsi. And a Tutsi who lost their herd could lose that status. Identity was fluid. It was more about your wealth and your role in society than your bloodline. And then everything started to change. That social fluidity, it just began to evaporate with the arrival of Europeans. After Germany lost its colonies in World War I, control of Burundi was handed over to Belgium. And that's when things really took a turn. The Belgian administration came in and, their policies were just devastating. They took that flexible social ladder and basically poured concrete all over it. They created new administrative lines, they let political parties form along strictly ethnic lines, and they started treating Hutu and Tutsi as these fixed racial categories. They created a rigid system that was almost destined for conflict. So by the time Burundi gets its independence in 1962, it's inheriting a society that's already been fractured, The stage was pretty much set for tragedy. And just right out of the gate, the country loses one of its most promising leaders. We're talking about Prince Rwagasore. He had led this multi-ethnic unity party to a huge victory. His assassination just created this massive power vacuum and threw gasoline on the very political fires he was trying to put out.
What came next was just this devastating, terrible cycle. A downward spiral of coups, ethnic violence, and all-out war. The hope of independence just faded into darkness. The monarchy was overthrown, a horrific state-led genocide against Hutus happened in 1972, and then the assassination of the country's first democratically elected Hutu president in 1993 kicked off a brutal civil war that lasted for 12 years.
Let's just pause on that number for a second. 300,000. That's how many people are estimated to have died in the Burundian Civil War, and most of them were civilians. And that's on top of the up to 210,000 more who died in the 1972 genocide. I mean, the human cost is just staggering. Okay, so how does this long, painful history connect to what's happening in Burundi today?
If you look at the population today, you'll see the country's main ethnic groups, the Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa. And these are the very same groups whose relationship, once so complex and fluid, was just tragically simplified and weaponized by colonial policies in the power struggles that followed.
And this really brings us right back to that central paradox we kick things off with. How could a nation with such a long, proud history of independence end up facing such incredible economic challenges?
Well, if you look at the economy, it's almost entirely agricultural, with most people just trying to grow enough food to survive. It's one of the most rural countries on Earth. And get this, foreign aid makes up a jaw-dropping 42% of the national income. This is the direct economic fallout of decades of conflict.
And all of this leads to a pretty grim reality. Widespread poverty, food shortages, chronic malnutrition, these aren't just statistics. They are the direct, tangible results of that instability that tore society apart, slammed the brakes on development, and left generations with very little opportunity.
So what are we supposed to take away from all this? Well, Burundi's story is this powerful and honestly tragic lesson in how identity itself can be engineered and weaponized. The colonial decision to turn flexible social roles into rigid ethnic categories, that created a fault line that just fractured a nation for generations. The violence that followed is the direct cause of the deep poverty we see today. But it also shows us that even after unimaginable trauma, culture can endure, and peace, no matter how fragile, is possible.
And that leaves us with a final, really big thought. A tough question, really. For Burundi and for so many countries with similar histories, the path forward is just so tangled up with the past. It raises this fundamental question: how can a society build a new future without ever forgetting where it's been?